Hello, thank you for visiting Echoes of Crime. Today, I want to tell you a story of a case that seems like it only happens in a horror movie but is a real haunting. Imagine this scene. Late afternoon, November 30, 2017, the air is chilly, dusk is falling over the dense forest near the south of France. A lone firefighter trudges along the forest paths of the Picole Forest, the border of the Ares department. Suddenly, smoke billows overhead. As he approaches, he discovers a white Renault Kangoo, completely burned, half buried in snow, silent, gloomy, abandoned. What impresses him most is not just the glow of the ashes, it is the meticulous attention to detail. No charred remains, no blood, no signs of struggle, just the strong smell of gasoline. The fire had not been an accident, it had been planned. Someone had deliberately destroyed the car in haste, erasing almost all traces. When the police traced the license plate, they discovered it was registered to Christophe Ors, a resident of the nearby Meaux commune. His daughter Celia had been with him earlier that day, and now neither had been heard from since mid-afternoon. This was no ordinary disappearance. A normal day for father and daughter had turned into something else entirely. Everything about the burned car suggested planning, a cover-up, and a horror unfolding just below the frozen surface. That morning, they left for Paymes station, where Celia planned to catch a train to Toulouse. The calls, the texts, all ended around 4 p.m. No one, not Christophe, not Celia, made it to their destination. As night fell, their phones went unanswered. The charred wreckage of the Kangoo was found late at night, but by then all traces of the couple had disappeared. Initially, investigators thought it was a tragic traffic accident in the snowy terrain, but the lack of tire tracks, footprints, or any debris led them to believe it was something much darker. Amid the steep slopes and dense undergrowth, with no cell phone reception, a full-scale search was launched. Firefighters, gendarmes, dogs, helicopters, every resource available. The missing father and son became the center of a nightmare that was slowly unfolding. This was only the beginning, because in the months and years that followed, the burned-out Kangoo will become a symbol of betrayal, cruelty, and a well-hidden evil. Who are they? Who has reason to want them gone? Let's take a step back and find out about the people behind those names. Christophe Ors was born in the Isère department in eastern France, but in 2012 he moved to Arras with his partner, Marie-Joséphine Montesinos. They lived together for 4 years before separating in November 2016. Christophe stayed in the area, settling into a quiet house in Meaux that he found extremely peaceful, filled with historic architecture and nature, both of which he loved. A freelance gardener and landscape designer, Christophe is widely described by clients and colleagues as kind and caring. There was, however, a quieter side to him. He had limited contact with his daughter Celia, who was born during his previous marriage to Sandra, a resident of Isère. Celia, 18 at the time of her disappearance, had moved south to Toulouse to study cosmetology after graduating from high school. The move coincided with her renewed relationship with Christophe, a reunion they both cherished. Their relationship grew stronger in the months leading up to that fateful day. Social media posts, weekend visits, laughter. Celia was gentle, calm, fiercely loyal to her childhood friend turned boyfriend Thibaut, whom she had known since childhood. After she moved south, he followed her. She loved history and grand old buildings. She took care of her half-sister from her mother's second marriage. And although she lived away from home, she had seemed happy, steady, and determined lately. November 30, nothing unusual was planned. Christophe had an appointment to scout a site for a potential cabin project in the mountains. He mentioned this casually in a text message that afternoon. Then he was going to drive Celia to Paymes station so she could spend the night with Thibaut. Their texting plan: Celia would text when she arrived in Toulouse. She sent a text at 2 p.m. confirming that she was on her way to the station. But then, silence. Around 4:12 p.m., surveillance footage showed them south of Meaux, closer to where their burned-out car was later found. After that moment, all digital activity ceased. No banking, no phone activity, no text messages, no calls, nothing. It was as if they had disappeared. Celia's family and Christophe's relatives sensed something was wrong almost immediately. The phones went dead, daylight faded to darkness, Sandra and Thibaut were reported missing. Police began combing the area early on the morning of December 1, thinking that perhaps the Kangoo had slid into a remote ditch. Then firefighters found it. When investigators realized the car had been deliberately set on fire, the mood changed. This was no accident. This was the sign of a heinous, premeditated crime. The unexpected drama turned the entire operation around from a missing person case to a potential murder. From the jungle search to the digital forensics, to checking bank statements, credit card usage, travel routes. The first time they were seen driving normally, there was no sign of coercion in their messages. There was no sign of panic. Everything suggested they had been lured, perhaps under the pretext of that cabin project. The next morning, when Kangoo was found burned, the investigation became more urgent than ever. The gendarmes knew they were looking for more than just a missing father and son. They were following a ghostly trail, one that someone had deliberately erased. Christoph's phone records became their first target. Among the familiar names of friends, clients, family, one entry stood out: Bertili. No one in Christoph's life had ever known a Bertili. No mutual friends, no previous calls, no trace of him in emails or contact history. In fact, the phone number associated with Bertili had only been active for a few days. Then, just hours after Christoph and Celia disappeared, it went dark forever. Investigators now believe that Bertili was not his real name at all. It was a mask, an alias used to lure Christoph to a remote place away from prying eyes. And it worked. Tracing the father and son's movements on that final day added to the mystery. Surveillance cameras showed them heading toward the mountains near the Peakole Forest, the very wilderness where their charred kangaroo was later found. But there was no footage of them returning. Bank cards showed no spending after they left home, not a single withdrawal. Everything about their day up to that point had been normal: errands, intimate messages, plans for the future. And then nothing, which meant something sudden and decisive had happened. Digging deeper, the police began questioning people in Christoph's circle: friends, clients, neighbors, former partners. And one name kept popping up: Marie Josephine Montesinos. Marie was more than just an ex-girlfriend. She lived with Christoph for 4 years before they split in late 2016, and according to many, she did not take the breakup well. Some even say she harassed him afterward, sending him aggressive messages, confronting him in public, and stalking him. Christoph repeatedly told his family that he feared for his safety. He even said coldly, "If anything happens to me, look at her." Inside Christoph's home, investigators found evidence that reinforced his fears: printouts of hostile emails, handwritten notes about encounters with Marie, text messages accusing him of stealing, threatening to destroy him. One of her emails was particularly disturbing: "I know how to end this. Don't think you can go away peacefully." It's not hard to see why she became a figure of interest. 3 days after Christoph and Celia were reported missing, Marie was brought in for questioning. She claimed that she had not seen or spoken to Christoph on the day he disappeared. She admitted that their relationship had been troubled, but she portrayed herself as the victim, describing Christoph as manipulative and untrustworthy. But her story was not accepted by the detectives. They continued to investigate. Christoph's computer revealed a series of private emails and messages, which told a different story. Marie's tone shifted from pleading for contact to outright threats. She was unwilling to let go and did not hesitate to use force to keep him alive. And there was something else: a mysterious connection between Marie and another man, Jean-Paul Vittel. Vittel was no stranger. In fact, he had been romantically involved with Marie years earlier, between 2010 and 2012. After she broke up with Christoph, their relationship quietly rekindled. Investigators confirmed this through phone records showing that they were in contact almost daily in the weeks before Christoph and Celia disappeared. On the day of the disappearance, those calls were especially frequent. And here's the kicker: the mysterious number Bertili had lured Christoph. It was traced directly to Vittel. Now the story was starting to fall into place. Vittel, under another alias, had arranged to meet Christoph under the pretext of discussing a potential landscaping project. The meeting place, the same area where Christoph's car had been found burned out, it was clearly a setup, but what wasn't clear was why. Through wiretapping and surveillance, investigators began to discover a strained relationship between Marie and Vittel. He wasn't just an ex. He seemed completely manipulated by her. Their conversations were filled with emotional manipulation, repeated talk of revenge, and the same accusations she had hurled at Christoph. Investigators began to suspect that Marie had convinced Vittel that Christoph was a danger, possibly even to himself. She allegedly showed Vittel fabricated text messages in which Christoph appeared to threaten him and his family. If true, it would mean that Vittel was not just helping his ex-girlfriend. He believed he was protecting her and himself. By June 2018, 6 months after Christoph and Celia disappeared, the investigation had reached its climax. Police had arrested 4 people: Marie Josephine Montesinos, Jean-Paul Vidal, Marie's ex-husband, and a friend of Vidal's. The latter 2 were eventually released, but Marie and Vidal remained in custody. During questioning, Vidal confessed first. He admitted to being involved in what happened to Christoph and Celia, and what he described was horrifying. He said that on the day of the disappearance, he and another man ambushed Christoph with metal bars, hitting him repeatedly on the head. While Christoph was still alive, they tied him up with zip ties and threw him into a dug garbage pit. They covered the pit with concrete slabs. Vidal said that Marie was there, giving orders, loudly accusing Christoph as the blows fell. Celia, hearing the attack, locked the car doors. Vidal said that he again acted on Marie's instructions, this time resulting in Celia's death. Her body was then hidden in the woods, covered with fresh leaves, her backpack and belongings buried nearby. They then burned Kangoo. Vidal said the next day they met at Lake Montbel to destroy anything that might be connected to the crime, including the prepaid phones they had used to set the trap. The confession stunned even seasoned investigators. However, several details of Vidal's testimony matched the evidence they had gathered. The prepaid phone, the location of the burned-out car, the time stamp, the pre-dug hole. And most importantly, he led them to the body. The horror was no longer theoretical. It was real and worse than anyone could have imagined. When Vidal finally led the investigators into the Peakole forest, the significance of the moment was undeniable. He led them to a desolate patch of land just as winter was about to break. The ground was rough, the leaves and moss damp. There, half buried under heavy concrete slabs, was what he claimed was his burial place. The gendarmes began lifting the tombstones one by one. The stench of decay hit them immediately, unmistakable and nauseating even in the cold air. Beneath them was a body. Months of decomposition had taken their toll, but the forensic team could still see the injuries: a cracked skull, broken ribs, evidence of repeated brutal blows to the head. This was Christoph Ors. He had been there for more than half a year. Buried in that pit, his final resting place was chosen by his killers. Not far away, another search party moved through the dense woods. In a shallow grave under a canopy of fresh foliage, they found the remains of a young woman. The contents of the grave told a silent story: a backpack, pieces of clothing, a pair of shoes. The skull showed a gunshot wound to the right temple, fired from a distance of no more than 6 inches. The victim was Celia Ors. It was a discovery that stunned even the most seasoned officers. One moment, she had been a passenger in her father's car, looking forward to a night with her boyfriend. The next, she had been brutally executed. The crime scene teams worked meticulously, documenting every inch of both scenes. They collected soil samples, bagged pieces of clothing, photographed everything. This was not just a matter of recovery, but of building a tight record. The forensic examination confirmed what Vidal had said. Christoph had been attacked with a metal bar and buried alive, unable to escape the weight of the concrete. Celia's death was swift but deliberate, a close-range rifle shot, the body dumped and hidden in the woods. The brutality of the crime shocked the community. Christoph had not just been murdered, he had been gagged in a way that was meant to humiliate and erase him. Celia, a promising young woman, was killed simply because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or more accurately, because she was with the wrong person when her father's fate was already sealed. But while Vidal's confession paints a clear picture of the what, the why remains a mystery in the psyches of 2 deeply disturbed individuals. Marie Josephine Montesinos denies having planned the murder from the start. Instead, she tries to portray her involvement as a confrontation gone too far. She claims she only wanted to intimidate Christoph, not to kill. According to her, Celia's death was entirely Vidal's doing, but the investigation suggests otherwise. Phone records show an almost obsessive level of communication between her and Vidal before and on the day of the murder. Wiretaps picked up their angry discussions about Christoph. Investigators have no doubt that she was the driving force. Subsequent psychological evaluations described Marie as emotionally immature, manipulative, narcissistic, and controlling. She craved dominance in relationships, often using guilt, intimidation, and emotional blackmail to get what she wanted. Even during psychiatric evaluations, she attempted to manipulate the evaluator, feigning weakness while steering the conversation away from difficult questions. In contrast, Vidal was described as emotionally dependent and susceptible to suggestion. He admitted that Marie had convinced him that Christophe was dangerous. She allegedly fabricated text messages and emails, making Christophe appear to be threatening him and his family. Whether Vidal actually believed this or used it to justify his actions remains debatable, but he was clearly influenced by her. Investigators scrutinized Christophe's past interactions with Marie and discovered a disturbing pattern. He had reported her to the police 3 times in 2016 and 2017 for stalking, harassment, and false accusations. Marie had sent intimate photos of him to her superiors to damage his professional reputation. She had demanded money, accused him of theft, and publicly threatened to ruin his life. Christophe saw the danger. He warned others, but warnings don't always prevent tragedy. By the end of 2018, prosecutors had built a case file with meticulous detail. 2 crime scenes, 2 confirmed murders, 2 suspects in a toxic relationship of obsession and manipulation. The timeline is tight. June 2017. Marie and Vidal are said to have made their first attempt to lure Christophe to the same remote location. The plan fails when unexpected tourists arrive in the area. The following months, the pair continue to communicate, plot, and escalate their criticism of Christophe. November 30, 2017, using a prepaid phone and the alias Bertoli, Vidal arranges a meeting that leads Christophe and Celia into a deadly trap. December 1, 2017, Kangu's burned body is found. June 2018, Vidal's confession and the recovery of both bodies. For the prosecution, it is a chilling portrait of premeditation. However, even as the evidence mounts against them, both Marie and Vidal maintain versions of their own story that minimize their guilt. Vidal relies heavily on the idea that he acted under pressure, that Marie manipulated him into believing that Christophe was a direct threat. Marie, on the other hand, insists that she never wanted anyone to die, that it was all a scare tactic gone wrong. But public opinion is not so forgiving. For the Christophe family, these were not the actions of people who simply lost control. They were deliberate choices made step by step. It took nearly 6 years for the case to come to trial. 6 years in which the Christophe family lived with the burden of unanswered questions, and Celia's friends tried to make sense of her sudden, senseless absence. 6 years in prison, Marie-Joséphine Montesinos and Jean-Paul Vidal, each telling their own story, each trying to downplay their role in a crime that shocked the community. By November 17, 2023, a court in southern France was preparing for an emotional verdict. The prosecution had a clear goal: to prove beyond doubt that this was not a tragic accident or a quarrel gone wrong, but a premeditated double murder driven by resentment, control, and manipulation. From the start, prosecutors laid out a chilling roadmap. They showed the jury prepaid call recordings, the alias Bertoli calls between Marie and Vidal spiked on the day of the murder. They also showed the wiretaps moments where the tone between the two was not fear but a carefully calculated plan. The forensic evidence could not be ignored. Photographs of Christophe's burial site, the broken bones, the blows to the skull, the close-range rifle wound that ended Celia's life, a map tracking the couple's movements before and after the murder. And then there was the intention. The failed ambush in June 2017. The fabricated threats Marie sent to Vidal to convince him that Christophe was a danger. The pre-dug hole, waiting like a silent trap. This was not spontaneous. It had been building for months. The defense tried to fight back. Vidal's lawyers argued that he was a psychologically beleaguered man, manipulated by a woman he both loved and feared. They said he genuinely believed Christophe was a threat thanks to the fake messages Marie showed him. They argued that his violent actions were a misguided attempt at self-defense. Marie's defense team portrayed her as a flawed but non-violent woman, who let her emotions get the best of her. Yes, she was angry. Yes, she wanted to scare Christophe. But she didn't want him or Celia to die. They argued that the killing was Vidal's choice. But to the jury, I didn't mean to rang hollow. The scale of the planning, the brutality of the act, the effort to wipe away all traces were not signs of a momentary fit of anger. Psychologists testified in court about both defendants. Marie's assessment was damning. Manipulative, narcissistic, controlling, lacking empathy. She was described as someone who sought to dominate relationships and was willing to use others as tools for her own ends. Vidal's profile described him as emotionally dependent, affected, and easily influenced, but still capable of making decisions. His dependence on Marie did not deprive him of his autonomy. The prosecution summed it up simply: each played a role, she staged it, he played it, and together, they ruined two lives. The verdict was swift. After just 6 days of testimony, the court sentenced both Marie-Joséphine Montesinos and Jean-Paul Vidal to 30 years in prison with a minimum of 20 years before they could apply for parole. Both were banned from owning any weapons for the next 15 years. Vidal showed some remorse but said it was a result of fear and pressure. Marie never showed any remorse. Instead, she insisted that she had not intended to kill anyone, even as the court concluded that she was the motive behind the murders. For Christophe and Celia's loved ones, the verdict brought no joy. Justice was right, but no sentence could undo what had been lost. In one of the most emotional moments of the trial, Celia's mother Sandra addressed the court via video. Her words were direct, unwavering. "You took away from me the thing I loved most in the world. You took away my child. You took away her future, her laughter, her place in this family. And for what? For revenge, for lies? There will be no forgiveness. You will carry this pain with you forever, just as I will carry this pain." Her statement silenced the courtroom. For all the talk of forensic evidence, phone records, and psychological profiles, it was this raw, human, and unfiltered reminder that pierced every legal argument. When the gavel came down, the trial was over. But the story was not over. Christophe's siblings continued to talk about the dangers of ignoring threats and harassment. Sandra has chosen to honor Celia's memory by sharing her story not only as a victim of a violent crime, but also as a bright young woman who loved history, architecture, and the simple joy of spending time with those she loved. Picole Forest still stands, its hillsides calm under the changing seasons. But for those who knew Christophe and Celia, it will never be just a forest again. It is a place where trust is turned into a weapon, where manipulation becomes deadly, and where love, both romantic and familial, is twisted into a motive for murder. And so we are left with questions that no court can fully answer. How far can one person's influence reach when driven by obsession? How could ordinary people without a criminal record commit such calculated atrocities? And perhaps most hauntingly, if Christophe's warnings had been taken more seriously, could it have been prevented? For now, the answer lies only in the echoes of the forest path, in the memory of a burned-out kangaroo, and in the hearts of those who do not want Christophe and Celia to be forgotten. If you find this story haunting, remember that this is not a movie scene. This happened. These were real people with real lives taken away in the blink of an eye. And it is a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters do not lurk in the shadows. They lurk right in front of your eyes.